to the Daily Dodge TV studios with Terry Bell for today's Community Comment.
Thank you very much, Jake, and welcome everybody to Community Comment. Our guest today is State Representative Andrew Hysell. We are talking about all kinds of things today that happen in the Capitol that affect us back home. If you have any questions or comments for Andrew, we invite you to be a part of the program. You can call us or text us at 920-887-9595. You can also call the WBEV studio line at 885-4446. Representative Hysell, thanks so much for coming back on Community Comments.
Absolutely, Terry. Good to be here.
It was good to have you here. So, right now, the state legislature is in the midst of a special session to pass a constitutional amendment to ban partisan gerrymandering. It's been a couple of weeks now or so. I haven't heard much new in the way of new developments. What's going on with that?
Good question. Not sure. The governor called in April 14th a special session to bring the legislature back to consider his proposed constitutional amendment to the Wisconsin State Constitution to ban partisan gerrymandering. And we gabbled in, and then essentially the session was put on hold, but not gabbled out. So we've basically been on hold in a skeletal form of session since.
I imagine this is a better question for leadership, but what's the holdup?
Don't know. I don't know what they're doing. Again, we're not as the Democratic caucus. It's really not in our hands what the legislature does. The governor can call people in, but beyond that, it's really up to the Assembly Republicans, at least in our body, to decide what happens next.
Okay. Let's just talk about the broader issue. Wisconsin recently adopted new maps after court rulings ended years of gerrymandering. But the problem is we don't have a permanent redistricting plan for the future.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting issue because historically, I think there's been a really strong argument that we should have the redistricting process be independent and outside the political process. And that has been something that for decades, I think Democrats have been pushing for. The problem is that this past election cycle, or I guess last year, the Trump administration has been demanding that Republican states do take unprecedented steps and to actually begin redistricting mid-decade and to specifically create districts with the sole intent of switching control of the seats with no other consideration. I'll give you an example. In Tennessee, they basically cut up the city of Nashville into 3 separate districts so that the Democrat who represented it couldn't win re-election. And at this point, none of those 3 congressional members of Congress who are Republican, who now represent a third of Nashville, have an office there. It was just purely a power play. And that's kind of something that calls into question, what should we be doing in other states? And we've seen in the state of Virginia and the state of California, after what happened in Texas, what happened in Tennessee, what happened in North Carolina, they've actually amended their constitutions to respond so as not to allow the Trump administration to change the field so much that a majority of Americans can't elect the people that they want to Congress.
Any chance of that happening in Wisconsin between now and the midterms?
I don't think so. I don't think that's really possible. But I do think it calls into question, is this the right policy for the right time? We just saw literally the voters of Virginia say, listen, if Trump is going to put his hand on the scale in other states, we're going to amend our Constitution, which uses an independent commission to set maps. We're going to amend our Constitution to respond to what Trump's doing. Because ultimately, if somebody's willing to change the rules so much that the majority can no longer rule in the United States of America, does it make sense to pretend like we're just our own little island in Wisconsin? And we're not the United States of Wisconsin. We're the United States of America. And so we have to think about that. Because, again, when there's attempts to roll back democracy, roll back the way our government is supposed to work constitutionally, we can't just sit by.
What about the future in Wisconsin? We have new maps now for the Assembly and Senate, and that seems to have brought about some changes in some districts. We have a lot of lawmakers now announcing that they are not seeking re-election. I have to imagine that has something to do with the new landscape out there. What would you like to see Wisconsin adopt for the Senate and Assembly for the future and stick with for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, Terry. So let me just kind of give a quick background. So for the past 15 years, Wisconsin has had a gerrymander that was put in place in 2010 by the Assembly and the Senate Republicans that some have called the worst in the country. And let me just give you an example of that. Texas, as a comparison, has about 55% Republican vote. They have about 60% to 65% of the representation in the legislature. So their gerrymander, they have one in Texas, magnifies their vote, magnifies their influence based on the vote they get. They win the majority, they have a very strong majority in the legislature. For the past 15 years, we've had a situation where the Democrats in the Assembly have won statewide the majority vote, and they've had about a little more than a third of representation in the Assembly. So in 2018, Democratic vote was 53%. We had 36% representation in the Assembly. So the Wisconsin gerrymander, the Republican gerrymander, was so bad that it literally turned it on its head. The majority of the voters was literally was out of power, and so that's why we needed a change. And the change that Evers put through, to his credit, was very fair, because the Republicans won 50.58% of the vote in 2024 under Evers' maps. And guess how many seats the Democrats got in the legislature? They got 45, and the Republicans got 54. So for anybody, including Robin Voss, to say that the Evers maps are a Democratic gerrymander is objectively false. And he's a really smart guy, so I cannot understand how he actually believes that.
We're talking to State Representative Andrew Hysell. We need to take a quick break here, but we'll be right back. You're listening to Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
It is 95.3 WBEV powered by Daily Dodge, and we are back with more community comment. So in the Daily Dodge TV studios, here's Terry Bell.
Thank you very much, Jake, and welcome back to Community Comment. Our guest today is State Representative Andrew Hysell. If you have a question or a comment for Andrew, we invite you to join the show. You can call us or text us at 920-887-9595. You can also call the WBEV studio line at 885-4446. And Andrew, you're supporting a bill that would require, and frankly, I'm surprised this isn't already the case, but there's a bill to require insurance plans to cover prosthetic limbs and custom orthotic braces when they're medically necessary. I'm a little bit surprised that this isn't already the case.
Yeah, sure. I mean, me too. When I learned about this, and this bill is a good example of how individuals, advocates can make a real difference, because when you know about a problem and you tell your legislator, that's how good laws can be made to address problems, because we don't know what's going on unless people can come in and tell us. So I'm the author of Assembly Bill 1121. This bill basically is for those people with limb loss and limb differences. It just says that your health insurance should cover a prosthetic for you, and it should be a prosthetic that allows you to perform, maximize your limb function. I met with members of Limitless Wisconsin, and they explained that under current law, a health insurance company can provide sort of the bare minimum in terms of a prosthetic for a child. And that bare minimum might not be enough for that kid to play and run around. And to me, that was heartbreaking. And I thought to myself, you know what, let's fix this. And the great news was Senator Melissa Ratcliffe, who actually represents my district as well, but in the Senate, was thinking the same thing. So she introduced a Senate version, which is Senate Bill 1077, and I introduced the Assembly version. And really looking forward to getting this passed next session. Unfortunately, we weren't able to pass it this session, but looking forward to pass it next session.
What kinds of examples did you get of people who were denied prosthetics and other devices and procedures that they really medically need?
Sure, yeah. So some of the examples I heard, and I heard from the doctors actually too, who provide these prosthetics, that insurance coverage is actually really robust and very extensive while your limb is being treated. So let's say you have an injury to your arm or your leg, and it's on the edge of whether you're going to need an amputation. You've got really good coverage of all the procedures to support your care around your limb. But as soon as it's amputated, the coverage is completely different. And there's a requirement for a single prosthetic, and then it can be a minimal prosthetic, as I was describing, potentially for a kid. So again, it's like these are things that you just may not realize it because it doesn't probably impact you. But for the people it does impact, it's really significant. There's this day we had today, we recognized April 18th as Everyone Can Move Day, and we had an event to celebrate and bring attention to limb loss and limb differences, because April is Limb Loss and Limb Difference Awareness Month. And that, again, is really just to try to make sure people understand this issue and how it impacts people. But, again, we like to focus that it's like a difference. It's not something that really makes you different or it should exclude you. It should be something that maybe it's just identified as, hey, it's a difference.
Any safeguards in the bill to make sure this doesn't mean higher premiums for all ratepayers?
I think that what we have to decide in this country is that when you have health insurance, what does that health insurance cover? And I'm a strong believer that health insurance should cover your health needs as an individual. It shouldn't cover what maybe some, executive somewhere off in a headquarter office decides it should cover. It should cover if you're paying premiums and you're paying your deductibles, you should be getting health insurance coverage. And honestly, we need to look at some of the costs in the system and maybe look at those and stop blaming, providing prosthetics for people who don't have an arm or a leg for increases in healthcare costs. Because I'm telling you, if you just look at the rate of, like, for example, pharmaceutical drug costs that we pay in this country compared to other countries, it's way out of whack. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to save money, and we don't have to, like, deny a kid a prosthetic limb to do that.
I know a lot of people who live with disabilities kind of chafe at the notion that they're doing anything or being inspirational at all. But I have to imagine that your interactions with the Limitless group has just put you in awe of some folks.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. I've seen parents and I've seen their kids testify on this issue. I've seen people who, deal with these things, and they've dealt with them, like older people who have limb differences or limb loss, and just them talking about in some Parade City Hall. I heard a gentleman talk about what it was like decades ago to grow up, like, with these sorts of differences. And yeah, people bear a lot in their individual lives, and it's really inspiring to see their resilience and then the way they power their personal experience into change for others.
And again, you're optimistic that this will get a little more traction in the next session?
Hey, once we have control of the state assembly, I really look forward to pushing this, because I think this is a bare minimum. This is, again, people's health insurance should provide them health care. It should not ration basic necessities like this. That's just not what health insurance should do.
Our guest today on Community Comment is State Representative Andrew Hysell. We need to take a quick break for the news, but we will be right back. You're listening to Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
Action here. You're listening to 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge, and Community Comment is presented by Professional Floor Covering. Now, without further ado, here is Terry Bell.
Thank you, Jake, and welcome back, everybody, to Community Comment. Our guest today is State Representative Andrew Hysell, talking about all kinds of things developing at the Capitol in Madison that affect us back home in the district. If you have any questions or comments for Andrew, we invite you to join the show. It's live over-the-air office hours. You can call us or text us at 920-887-9595. You can also call the WBEV studio line at 885-4446. Back in November, Congress passed a spending bill that fundamentally rewrites a federal hemp law. And I know that's something that you've been very concerned with, Andrew, especially how it affects farmers and other producers here in Wisconsin. And I was wondering, with the Farm Bill being debated this week, how we're coming out with that.
So back in November of last year, the Congress and the president basically changed the definition of hemp so that as of this year, this November, what we currently see at stores and available for purchase at Quick Trip in terms of hemp drinks will be federally unallowable. So you have a situation where consumers who like these products and the businesses here in Wisconsin that produce them literally will face a lot of uncertainty after November 12th of this year. The state of Wisconsin has a law in the books, statute 94.55, that separately from the federal government decriminalizes hemp-derived THC products, these drinks, for example. It decriminalizes them, and they are not unlawful under Wisconsin law. So what I think you might see after November 12th of this year, unless the state takes some action, you might have decriminalized hemp-derived THC products, but no regulation of them. And that's really the concern I have, because no upstanding business or farmer in the state of Wisconsin wants to operate without clear rules. We need rules to protect kids. We need from access. We need to protect consumers, and we make sure it's regulated. And so I'm really disappointed that the legislature refused to even pass those kinds of bare minimum standards in anticipation of what's going to happen this fall federally.
How does this affect a lot of people who may not use hemp products or may not realize they use hemp products? Why is this an issue that Wisconsinites should care about?
Well, it's an economic issue. Okay, it's an economic issue, and that is it's almost we're approaching $1 billion industry here in Wisconsin, and we're talking small business, the smallest of the small businesses. I met with Erin, who owns a place called Kelly Greens in Wauwatosa, and it's an old gas station. She's turned into a hemp shop, and it's almost like a little. They've got like a counter, kind of like an old soda shop, where they mix up drinks. They have all these edibles. They have sleep aids. They provide a number of different products that people want. She was laid off from a job back in 2020, like a really high level job. And so instead of going and finding another corporate job, she started her own business. And for 6 years, she's like built this business. And so what does it mean for everybody in the state? Well, how would you like it if after working your tail off for 6 years, pursuing the American dream, somebody in Washington, D.C. decided you were going to go away on November 13th? I think that's unfair. I think it's bad for the economy here in Wisconsin, and that's why the state needs to step up and do something about it. And I don't understand why the legislature didn't, move on some legislation to protect these businesses and consumers and kids in the process.
What kind of regulation would be fair and equitable and beneficial for most people in Wisconsin?
Sure. I mean, basically, you need rules for the growing, for the processing, and for the sale of products. There's some really great companies here in Wisconsin that do all this stuff voluntarily. They send out their products for third-party testing. They ensure that they're high quality, and then they age gate them. They do 21 or older in all their stores, and they educate their consumers about the effects of the products. Well, we need those kind of rules applied to everyone, including maybe the corner store gas station, where kids are maybe buying these things, or their parents are buying them, not even realizing what's in them. That's why we need rules. We also need to make sure that consumers can trust what they're buying. When they buy something, it's the right dosage, it has the intended effect. Again, really common sense stuff here. And that's unfortunate. We just see time and time again that common sense doesn't win out when it comes to state politics here in Wisconsin.
It's sounding to me like the unintended consequence may be that we get kind of a lawless landscape where, people who are not, good players in this field can maybe get away with a lot more than they could in a much better regulated environment.
Unfortunately, yes. And I would say that the way I'm kind of looking at this is, we're going to have this change federally in November, assuming the Democrats take control of the state legislature, which I believe they will. I mean, you can see all these retirements. It's not coincidental. We need to move on this quickly. We'll need to move really quickly to throw a lifeline to businesses and farmers so that they are not subjected to possible litigation. They're not at risk. And then we also need to throw the lifeline at the consumer to give them the basic standards so they know what they're buying is safe and regulated, and also to protect kids. So I think once the Democrats have control, we are going to move quickly in that direction.
Yeah, it would have to be quickly, I'm guessing. So these changes would happen in November. The next legislature would not be seated until January. How does that gap in time get addressed?
Well, I think it's going to be a really difficult time. And in fact, we could have a special session and bring people back to talk about passing a bill to protect consumers, the local farmers, the local businesses. We could do that so that it happens before November 12th. But if that doesn't happen and there is no special or extraordinary session to deal with this issue, it's going to be a scary time for anybody who's in the business from November 12th until Democrats pass something to give them a lifeline and to address these unresolved issues. It's going to be a difficult time. And I wish, I feel for these people. I've met with them. They're small business people. They shouldn't have to be going through this. It's just not the way the state should be run. But until we have power, the best I can do is to advocate and educate and continue to bang on the drum that common sense on hemp should prevail.
Um, as a consumer product, how is it going over in Wisconsin? What is the demand out there for like Delta 8, THC drinks, gummies?
Well, what you're seeing is, and I'll speak specifically about the drinks, is that Wisconsin consumers are drinking less alcohol, and some of them are, drinking more, I guess, kombucha or soda or whatever. But some of them are drinking these drinks instead. I know bar owners who tell me that 1/5 of their receipts now are these hemp-derived THC drinks. And again, if they're consumed responsibly by adults, I think, heck, this is America. You should be free to make choices about yourself, about your life, about what you want to do. So I think that's great. More choices are better. And I think what you're seeing is people, as they learn about these products and they try them, a number of people like them.
We're talking to State Representative Andrew Hysell about all matter of things happening at the state capitol in Madison that affect us here in the district. We need to take one last quick break, but we'll be right back. You're listening to Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
Hey, it's
And we are back with the last segment for today's community comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge. Here's Terry Bell.
Thank you very much, Jake, and welcome back to Community Comment, everybody. Want to let you know that on Monday, our guest will be Lieutenant Jeremiah Johnson of the Beaver Dam Police Department. It's always an informative hour, and if you know Jeremiah, you also know that he's one of the nicest people you'll ever come across. So we always look forward to having Jeremiah on the show with us. That's coming up Monday on Community Comment. That's Monday morning at 10. Our guest today is State Representative Andrew Hysell, also one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He is joining us on the show, and you can talk to him directly if you like. You can call us or text us at 920-887-9595, or you can call the WBEV studio line at 885-4446. And Andrew, you brought my attention in preparation for this show to an interview that Ezra Klein did with tax scholar Ray Madoff in the New York Times, just about our tax system in America and why it's fundamentally not working, at least not working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this with you, Terry, because I do think that part of my job is to try to do a deep dive into certain issues and communicate that to folks, because if you don't have information, it's stuff can be kind of confusing, and especially with the frustrating trends we're seeing right now with affordability, it's like really important that these issues be discussed. So Ray Madoff, yeah, she's got this book called The Second Estate: How the Tax Code Made an American Aristocracy. She's really smart. She's a professor at Boston College, but she used to be an attorney that would counsel rich people on estate planning and essentially tax minimization strategies. And what she said that's really interesting, what she says in her book and what she talks about, is that the reason we're seeing these billionaires just skyrocket is that one of the ways they're doing this is they're essentially avoiding paying income taxes. And the way they do it, she explains it, it's like really simple. And I love this explanation because you can really understand it. Basically, while let's say you have somebody who has their own business let's say they're employed, they're a tradesperson and they do really well. Let's say they're a plumber and they're making, let's say $100,000 a year. They're paying income tax on that federally and at the state level. That's pretty significant. And they're probably, and once that person does really well, maybe they say making 150,000, they're paying like 30, 35. If you throw in property tax and like sales taxes, they're paying upwards of 40% of their income. 40%. That's a lot. Okay. Well, look at Jeff Bezos. What he does is he has a massive amount of equity in a company, for example, and he never gets paid a salary. What he does is he just borrows money using the collateral of what he owns and simply pays a very low interest rate because obviously anyone's going to lend him this money. They know he's good for it. So he ends up paying a small interest rate and he pays no income tax. I mean, his effective tax rate, income tax rate, is like less than 1% according to something that I just read. See, that's this problem, is that the way the tax system has been set up, it is allowing billionaires to become even bigger billionaires and pay less and less of share of the tax burden, while yet benefiting from having all the services, all the educated workers, all the systems in place that allow them to maximize their wealth. Because in the end, a billionaire is not working a billion times harder than that plumber I was just describing. In fact, I would say sometimes that plumber is probably working harder than the billionaire. In our tax system, I just would say, like, and a result of this is that working people in Wisconsin, we can see it. We're paying more and more tax. I mean, we're just seeing it. Our property taxes keep going up. Well, that's because other people are paying less. It's not an accident.
Right, and I think that would be helpful for more people to understand is that when you have a group of people with a lot of money, not paying a lot of taxes, a lot of what we see around us as being unfair or not working well is the direct result of in an inequitable way that we're taxed in this country.
Yeah, and it used to be very different. When the United States of America was at its apex of strength and influence in the 20th century, we had some of the most progressive taxes we ever had. We had taxes that made sure that those at the very top who were benefiting immensely from this strong, powerful country were paying their fair share back. There's been an intentional effort to change that over 50 years, and we're seeing the tail end of what that looks like. And what it looks like is something that is increasingly making it unaffordable for regular people who work really hard. And I feel terrible for them. Okay. I go to doors, I knock on doors, and people, senior citizens, are seeing their property taxes go up because the wealthy in the past 10 years in Wisconsin have had income tax cuts, and the increases have gone into things like property taxes. And I'm like, these people worked all their life. They worked really hard, and they bought a house. and they thought they paid it off, and they thought they could afford it. And then how much are they getting in an increase in Social Security? Well, it doesn't correspond to the property tax increase. So yeah, I'm like really concerned about people like that, and I'm like really not concerned about people who are billionaires.
Yeah, and the discussion goes because I think a lot of people have this idea, this basic understanding of how the graduated income tax works. But as you explained earlier, a lot of people are getting out of paying those higher rates by simply not drawing a salary.
Exactly. They just borrow money. They decide when and if ever they pay tax, income tax. And it's just, and again, it's like, it's hard to conceptualize how much $1 billion is. Nobody hearing this, I would bet money, will ever be a billionaire. It's like not something you'll ever be able to get to because you haven't had an opportunity gaming the system to basically set it up so that you can enter that category. And so, because once you get to that level, it literally just starts to self-perpetuate. It accelerates. And we're seeing that with Elon Musk. And he could become a trillionaire because once you get to a certain level, the brakes are off. I mean, another thing that Madoff talks about are these things called dynasty trusts. And it's a way to avoid what used to be the estate tax. And like for all practical purposes, she said the estate tax no longer exists, but they still keep it around, and they kept it around in the big, beautiful bill so that we can all be kind of fooled that there is such a thing. But for all practical purposes, the uber wealthy don't pay estate taxes. They can create these dynasty trusts and literally create hereditary like power and wealth, which is not what America is about. America is about people working hard and getting paid for their work and building their own futures. And it's not about creating, generations and generations of like billionaire trust fund babies.
I should have come prepared with some examples, but anecdotally, I've heard over the years that um, things would be much different if simply the people who could afford to pay more and ought to be paying more were paying more. We talk a lot about what government spending can and can't do. Well, it could do a lot more if people were paying in at the rate that many people feel they ought to be.
Yeah, there's there's no free lunch. You got to pay. We got to pay for things like healthcare, education, and roads. We got to pay for those, and like we need to all pitch in. And I believe like the average Wisconsinite is doing more than their fair share. We've got a system that is increasingly skewing towards the billionaire class, and they also are increasingly influencing public policy. Look at Elon Musk spent was it $100 million in the judicial Supreme Court race last year? He doesn't even live in Wisconsin. $100 million. When I was a kid in Wisconsin, that didn't happen. That's not the way it worked. Why is that changed? Well, it's because we've seen this emerging billionaire class. We've seen them accelerating their wealth at the expense of others. And now we see them like actually controlling or trying to control the political process. So I think we just got to call it out. We got to call it out. And that's why I'm glad we're talking about it, Terry, because I think we need to discuss this. Your taxes are going up. It's a problem. Don't blame the schools. Don't blame the fact that you need to like pay for your roads. Let's look at the billionaires and demand that they do their fair share because they benefit the most economically from a strong United States of America.
When the topic of taxing the wealthy at a higher rate, the pushback always comes back. Well, these are the people creating the jobs, and if you hurt their capital, then we're not getting the factories and other businesses that people need to for that job creation that keeps us in the working class employed in homes.
Yeah, I would say the 1990s want their talking points back. I mean, look at these companies. They're earning record profits. They're buying their own stock back, which used to be considered a bad practice that was prohibited in the 1980s. A company couldn't buy its own stock back. Now they do it like constantly, and it's viewed as a good thing. We used to have situations where if a company laid off people, it was like a sign the company was going down. Today, their stock prices go up. The idea that these companies and that these really, really uber wealthy billionaires need this incredibly preferential, unfair tax treatment in order to continue, in quotes, making jobs is completely contradicted by everything we see around us constantly. So again, I would just say, great argument in like 1994, but it's 2026. We know better.
We just have a couple of minutes left in the show. Andrew, any chance that you'll have to interact with constituents in the days and weeks to come?
Yeah, I'm running around knocking doors. I was in Madison, part of the district of the 48th includes Madison, talking to voters, catching up with people. It's great to see people I haven't seen for a bit. And best way to do it is when you knock on their door. I ran into a guy who he's 75. He coaches 2 kids' high school soccer teams. And I was just like, wow, it's amazing to see some of the stuff people are up to and learn about their lives. But yeah, Terry, just also want to say it's been really great being on your show, and I really appreciate it. I feel like you've done a great job as the host for your show, and I really appreciate your contribution to the discussion of ideas. And you do good work.
I appreciate that, Andrew. Thank you very much. And that is all the time we have for Community Comment. We want to thank State Representative Andrew Hysell for joining us today. It was always time well spent, Andrew.
Thank you, Terry.
And we want to thank you for listening to Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
Big Brats